When people talk about John Carpenter's vampires, it usually gets written off as loud, trashy 90s Carpenter horror with James Woods yelling a lot. But if you actually look at what this movie is doing, it is way more interesting than that. Vampires reimagines vampire hunting as contract work for the Vatican, a job done by burned out guys like Jack Crow, cleaning up the mess the church itself created when it first turned a priest into a vampire. And not just any vampire, the first. Under all the gore and macho nonsense, this is a story about labor, burnout, and a corrupt institution that makes monsters, lies about it, and then chews through the people that it hires to fix the problem that they created. Let's talk about why Vampires is less gothic romance and more Western with fangs and HR violations. Welcome back to Retro Horror School, where we discuss, dissect, and analyze horror from the 1970s through the 2010s. I am Brandy, otherwise known as the Terrorific Lady. And today we're headed to the New Mexico desert to talk about John Carpenter's Vampires from 1998. Class is in session. If you go in expecting a gothic vampire movie, Vampires looks broken. There's no big gothic castle. There is no tragic immortals spouting poetry and writing it by candlelight. There's a truck, there is a winch, and there is a lot of dirt. So much dirt. Sand too, but mainly dirt. The movie makes a lot more sense if you read it as three things that are all layered on top of each other. A Western, a workplace job movie, and a church conspiracy story. First, the Western, because most of this movie lives out in the desert. Empty New Mexico roads, dusty towns, some bleached missions. The opening nest raid feels less like a gothic horror set piece and more like a posse just rambling into an outlaw's hideout. We've got a crew of rough men riding in together, a frontier house full of goons to clear out, and the final showdown in a near-abandoned town that looks like it was just plucked straight out of a cowboy movie. Even the structure is Western. Jack Crow's team and Jack Crow himself, they all operate like hired guns. They come into town, they do the job, they cash out, and they move on. There is nothing romantic and spiritual about it. It is contract killing with crosses. Second, this is a job movie. Look at that opening raid scene. It is insanely methodical. They sweep the house, stake 9 vampires, drag them out with the winch, and let the sunlight do the rest. They have a truck full of gear. They have a backup system for locked doors. And they have a system that they have clearly run many, many times before, so they know it works. After the job, they don't kneel and they don't pray. They hit the motel, they trash the place, they drink like sailors, and they party with sex workers. They brag about kills the way people brag about good sales numbers at work. It feels less like Van Helsing and more like a very dangerous blue-collar gig. And underneath all that, you've got the horror of the church. Colonel Alba gives Jack his orders. He doles out just enough information and then shoves him back out into the field. We later find out that Valak, the master vampire that Jack is hunting, is an ex-priest that was turned into a vampire through an exorcism ritual that went horribly wrong. And they used what is called the Black Cross of Bazir, which is a church relic, to do the exorcism ritual. The ritual that created Valak was a mistake made by the church. The decision to also bury the truth completely about it and hide it, also a mistake by the church. So the setup is already pretty awful. The institution makes the monster. The institution covers the monster up. And then they send guys like Jack and his crew to clean up their mess that they made. Once you see that, the whole movie's energy just shifts. It is not just some loud 90s gore fest. It's about living inside a system that uses you to clean up messes that you never even caused to begin with. Let's talk about the job now. Vampires is obsessed with vampire hunting as work. Not destiny, not prophecy, work. Jack and his crew are introduced like exterminators, but with much higher stakes. They know what they're doing and they want to get it done efficiently. And it's a job that they are really good at, and they seem to enjoy the rush of it. But they also expect to be paid. I mean, I wouldn't be going into a vampire nest for nothing in return. The church talks about replacing your slayers and forming a new team like it's just a line item in a budget. When Jack loses his entire crew at the motel, Cardinal Alba's response is basically replace them. And if you choose to go off alone and not replace your team, I cut off funding. No counseling, no support, new team, same job. That is not divine mission energy. That is a contractor being told, hit your quota or lose your contract. And Jack is clearly fried and clearly burned out. His whole personality is rage as a coping mechanism. We get flashes of why he killed his own father after his father was bitten by a vampire. And then once his father turned, his father killed his mother. So he had to not only kill his father, but watch his mother die. That's the trauma history sitting under, gosh, I love my job. The motel party is peak burnout behavior. I'm all up for celebrations, but that kind of celebration doesn't feel healthy. It feels like people who don't quite know how to switch out of fight mode. They blow off steam in the most destructive ways possible. Sex, alcohol, destruction, because that's the only way they know how to feel off duty. Then Valak comes into that hotel room and wipes them all out in minutes. Almost the entire crew gone. The cost of that job is brutal. And in the church's eyes, they're all replaceable. All expendable, all replaceable. The character of Montoya is the other side of the burnout point. Katrina bites him when he tries to stop her from jumping out of a hotel window. He knows exactly what being bitten means, and he knows exactly what Jack will do to him the second that he finds out. So he hides it. He keeps working while injured, pulling the winch, backing Jack up, driving the truck, because in his mind there are only two options. Work until you die or die sooner. What choices, huh? There's denial in there, sure, but there's also this weird kind of resignation. He knows how this ends. He just wants to try and squeeze out just a little more time. Workers hiding injuries, showing up sick, pushing through burnout because they can't afford not to. That's written all over Montoya. And then there's Katrina. The moment that Valak bites her, everybody stops talking about her as a person and more like she's a tool or a piece of equipment. She's naked, she's tied to the bed, and when she's not, she's still monitored like she's some kind of device. Montoya even flat out told her, "You're the bait, honey. Sorry, that's it." Jack barely even acknowledges her name. She's just a shortcut to Valak, and that's it. The few times that she gets treated like a person is when Montoya tells her to eat so she won't turn to a vampire as fast, and when she tries to jump out the dang window. Even then, it's tenderness layered over utility. She is literally her body and what that body can do for the mission. So in the middle of this movie, you have Jack, the burnt-out company man, Montoya, the worker hiding a fatal injury to stay useful, and Katrina, the tool with a pulse. It's contract work inside a broken system. If Jack and his crew are the labor, then the church is the management, and it's not a good boss. Through Father Cateau, we learned that Valak wasn't some ancient random demon. He was a priest. He was tried for heresy, burned at the stake, and used in a ritual that was supposed to cast out evil. Instead, that ritual failed big time and made Valak the first vampire. So, the church failed to stop evil, created something worse, and then buried the evidence. The Black Cross of Béziers gets shuffled from Spanish mission to Spanish mission. Only a few people know the full story, and the slayers that risked their lives cleaning up this mess, they certainly don't. Valak wanting to complete the ritual and walk in sunlight is the original sin coming full circle. The church tried to use him. It went wrong. Now he wants to finish what they started and become unstoppable. Then there's Cardinal Alba, Jack's handler. On paper, he's Jack's moral authority and a direct line to God's work. In practice, he's a bureaucrat with a secret. He talks to Jack like an employer talking to a difficult contractor. When we finally see the truth, Alba admits that he is terrified of death.
As one grows old, as death approaches, we begin to question our faith. And I've found mine lacking. Is there a God? Is there a heaven? I can no longer answer this for certain. I've witnessed no miracles, had no visions, and the prospect of death terrifies me. I realized I have only one alternative, and I made a bargain with the devil, if you wish.
He's seen no miracles, no visions, and he can't handle the idea of just oblivion and nothing. So he does what a lot of powerful people in horror do. Makes a deal with the devil. He agrees to help Valak complete the ritual in exchange for immortality. He knows exactly what that means for everybody else. He just doesn't care. Eternal life can change your heart, he said, which is a wild way to describe throwing the world under the bus. Gee, thanks. The same institution that created the first vampire hid that fact and then sent men like Jack to die for it, is now actively helping the monster become stronger as long as the right person gets to live forever. That's hypocrisy. That is institutional rot. Put simply, the pattern looks like this. The church created Valak. The church hid Valak. The church hires Jack's crew to kill Valak's kind. The church lies to those crews about what they're really fighting. And when the truth gets too close, the church chooses the monster over its own people. And Jack understands this. He's still doing his job, but any illusion that he's on the side of a pure, honest institution is gone. That's a very 90s kind of horror. What will the institutions that claim to fight evil do to protect themselves? We already talked about what everyone does in the plot. Now let's frame what they mean inside this angle. Jack Crow is an anti-hero, not a saint. If you strip the vampires out, he would very easily fit into a grim crime story. He's brutal, he's mean, and he is very comfortable with violence. His backstory explains the obsession. That's a straight line from personal trauma to I will dedicate my life to make sure that this never happens to anyone again. It's also why, for the most part, once he starts getting suspicious of the church, it's also why he tolerates them as well. He knows, he kind of has an idea that they are shady or they're not telling him the whole truth, but he figures that they're on his side. When he spares Montoya and Katrina at the end, giving them a 2-day head start, it's not soft, it's transactional.
When did she first bite you?
2 days ago. I still covered your ass.
Yes, you did. So I'd say I owe you 2 days back.
You covered my ass for 2 days while you were bitten, so I'm gonna give you 2 days back in return. It's loyalty, but it's still spoken in the language of work and debt. He walks away from that mission with one priest and a pile of bodies behind him, ready to do it all over again. Montoya feels like the guy who took a rough job because it paid and now he can't imagine doing anything else. He tells Katrina exactly what's happening to her. He ties her up, cleans her up, and explains that she's bait. He saved her life, but only to turn her into a tool for Jack. And then when she bites him, everything flips. He becomes what she is, scared, terrified, and hiding the truth. He still pulls the winch. He still helps Jack. He still does the work because the only option is to let himself fully turn and walk into the sun. By the end, his only path out is running with Katrina, staying a step ahead of the guy he used to work for, hoping that those 2 days matter. He's not a chosen warrior. He's a tired man just trying not to die on the job. Katrina is caught in the worst place. She's not a slayer. She's not a vampire with agency yet, and she has no say in how people use her. The camera often frames her in ways that underline that. Restrained, exposed, watched. She isn't given much room to process what's going on around her. The one time that she tries when she says, "I don't want to live," when she's thinking about turning, she's shut down by the plot moving around her. And the end, when she leaves with Montoya, is surprisingly sad. It's not a victory. It's two doomed people deciding to share their fate instead of Jack deciding it for them. If Jack represents the worker who has fused his whole identity to his job, Katrina and Montoya are what happens when the job literally eats you up and spits you back out. Father Cateau starts out as a wide-eyed, excited, somewhat naive priest who thinks that vampire slayers are tools and soldiers of God, and Jack destroys that fantasy pretty quickly. He hears about Jack's past, he knows that the church created Valak and hid it, and he had to watch one of his own leaders, Cardinal Alba, side with a monster. By the end, Cateau is threatening to kill himself to stop the ritual, and walking across the desert with Jack, gun in hand, ready to keep killing vampires. He hasn't lost his sense that what they're doing matters, but his faith has now shifted away from the institution, and he is now siding with the people who actually face the violence on a daily basis. Valak is scary because he's the result of a church that thought it could use ritual to control darkness and instead created something much worse. He is brutal. The Motel Massacre, the way he tears through slayers, but he's also very focused. He wants the Black Cross, he wants to complete the ritual, and he wants the sun. He is an echo of the church's own drive. Power at any cost, no matter who burns. All this lands differently because of how Carpenter shoots and scores the movie. This is not a gothic score, it's rock and blues. It's a dusty bar band, not a choir. That instantly shifts the vibe from eternal tragedy to ugly work. The visuals follow that. The open landscapes, the crew walking in a line towards the nest like outlaws going to a shootout, the masters rising out of the ground in wides that could belong in a western if you swap fangs for guns. Sunlight is the central weapon. The winch and crossbow are basically industrialized killing machines. Shoot a vampire with an arrow, let the winch drag him out into the sun, and let nature do the rest. Carpenter called this his chance to finally mash the genres of horror and western together.
I've always loved westerns, and I think one of the reasons I'm doing this movie is it's the closest I've come to being able to do a western.
You could feel that in the set pieces, the nest raid, the abandoned town, the final mission showdown. The movie looks like the Wild Bunch had a messy baby with a Fangoria cover. Is it over the top? Absolutely. Is some of the dialogue cringy? Yes. But the craft underneath still feels like Carpenter. Clear action, strong geography, and a score that tells you exactly what kind of world that you're in. When Vampires came out, critics were split. Some people called it crude, nasty fun, a grungy horror western. Others said it was absolutely ridiculous without being funny enough. Or complained that it was just one showdown and one fight after another without having any likable characters at all. It made its budget back, it did well overseas, especially in Japan, and it became Carpenter's only real financial success of the 90s. But it also got slapped with a D+ cinema score, which tells you that audiences were confused about what they were even watching. Today, horror fans are still divided. Some love it, call it underrated. Some think it's misogynistic, cringy, or just mid-tier. And most people don't even put it anywhere near his top tier. Personally, I ranked it 10 out of his 11 horror films. This is not Carpenter firing on all cylinders like he did with The Thing or Halloween. But I also think if you read it through labor, burnout, and institutional rot, it becomes a very clear picture of late 90s Carpenter. Tired of institutions, still in love with westerns, still very honest about what violence does to people. So why does any of this matter now? Why does Vampires matter now? Because we talk about burnout constantly. We live in a world where people are exhausted by jobs that they hate, or by having no job that feels meaningful at all. We dismiss dirty jobs and the people who do them as non-essential until we need them. The slayers and vampires are those workers. The job looks cool from the outside. Up close, it's trauma, low support, and replaceability. We also live in a time where institutions are very good at dodging responsibility, hiding bad decisions, spinning narratives, outsourcing the worst tasks to the people with the least amount of power, making deals with metaphorical monsters because it keeps the right people safe. The Church in Vampires is a genre version of that. And then there's how horror handles violence. Some stories sell us righteous violence where the revenge feels clean, it feels deserved. You're rooting for that character who's committing that revenge. Other stories show us the cost, how the violence scars and traumatizes everyone involved. Vampires sits in this really odd middle. We understand why Jack wants Valak dead, and we also see the bodies of his entire team and the bodies of innocent people pile up along the way. The cost of his mission is very real, and it's mostly paid by people who don't really get a say. For me, that's where the movie becomes interesting. Not, is John Carpenter's Vampires secretly a masterpiece, but who's doing the killing? Who made the monster? Who gets to walk away in robes and who gets buried in the desert? That's media literacy. That's where a noisy 90s vampire western suddenly lines up with real conversations that we're still having today about work, institutions, and what gets called holy. So no, I don't feel Vampires is top tier Carpenter. It's over the top, it's cringy in spots, and it definitely feels like a product of the late 90s. But it's also a western and vampire drag about Vatican contract killers, cleaning up a mess the church made and then lied about. And if you watch it through that lens, it stops being lesser Carpenter and starts being very on brand for a director who has always been very suspicious of power. If you like this breakdown, my Apocalypse Trilogy deep dive is where he burns the world down on his own terms. Body, faith, reality. But now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on John Carpenter's Vampires? Do you think it's underrated? Do you think it's just mid-tier? Do you not care for it at all? Why? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this video with someone who is a John Carpenter fan or just a fan of vampires in general. Class is dismissed, everybody, for now, but I will see you next time. Bye.